Hey everybody, welcome in. We're here to preview week 8 of MLS action. And in the meantime, we've had a lot of midweek drama with the first round of US Open Cup action featuring MLS clubs going on in the round of 32, and also the Champions Cup quarterfinals concluding. We now know the semifinalists. It'll be LAFC against Toluca and Nashville against Tigres. So LAFC beating Cruz Azul and Nashville beating Club America, and then LA Galaxy and the Sounders falling short against Toluca and Tigres respectively. But also in Open Cup action, 16 MLS teams featuring this season with the new changes to the formatting. Not all MLS teams competing, but out of those 16, 13 advancing onto the round of 16. The three teams that lost to their lower league opposition being Austin losing to Louisville City, and then Kansas City losing to Colorado Switchbacks, and finally DC United losing to Knoxville. And those were the disappointing results for MLS. So not as many cup sets this year, but regardless, still opportunity for the USL Championship and League One sides to make a bit more noise, but the round of 16 is all already fully set. And of course, with all of that going on, these MLS teams have to prepare for week 8 this weekend, and rotation expected for sure. So I'll get you everything you need to know as far as lineup expectations, injury news, and give some analysis with, of course, some predictions at the end. So if you're looking for MLS content like this weekly, please make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Let's get into everything you need to know for week 8. The slate starts off on Friday night. I think it's the first Friday night game of the entire season between Whitecaps and Kansas City. Whitecaps, for obvious reasons, not in the US Open Cup, so they had the full week of rest coming off back-to-back wins now at home. They continue that against the Kansas City side that's only going to have 2 days of rest between their Open Cup game and this one, and they have to continue their road travels from midweek. They were one of only 3 teams, like we said, eliminated in the round of 32 from an MLS standpoint, and they did not pull any punches as far as their lineup went. They went out with a full attacking and strong lineup for their standards, who would start in a normal MLS game, and they just got completely embarrassed by the Colorado Springs Switchbacks of the USL Championship. And Rafa Wiki is, not bringing too much change to this side. It's still a pretty bang average roster. The only positive, in a sense, looking forward was that Kapita, their signing from the Polish league, made his first actual start after getting a bench appearance last time out in MLS play against San Jose. But the Whitecaps are unbelievably favored to win this match as far as the betting odds go, and for very, very good reason. They've maybe not been 100% so far as that same level they reached last season, but they're still doing the business. They're still very strong at home, and their players are delivering. So you should expect a full strength lineup from the Whitecaps here against a Kansas City side that is now 3 losses on the bounce, 4 including the Open Cup loss. And things are looking very, very bleak for this team. It's really hard to give them any sort of a chance in this one. But, MLS can bring those types of random results week in, week out. But here I'm going to stick with the home team, the much better team anyways, the Whitecaps, to win this one on a Friday night. Here we've got Toronto hosting Austin. Toronto coming off a draw against Cincinnati in which they were up against 10 men, but it allowed Cincy to snatch a point with that one less player. And they have really, really bad news as well, as Mihailovic is now going to be out for at least 2 months with that pelvis issue that kept him out the previous 2 games as well. And that's a really big loss, considering, of course, we were all waiting on that connection between him and Sargent to finally just see it in general, not just get going, but just see it, because they hadn't started a single game together since Sargent joined. And now it's once again a question of, what is really this Toronto's team ceiling really going to be, because we're not going to see them at their best for, until after the World Cup, maybe, as far as the full strength of this roster goes. and that's really, really disappointing. But they continue their home streak here as far as the matches. It's going to be their 5th straight consecutive home game, and they play an Austin side that is really also down in the dumps. So once again, another team that got eliminated at the first round of asking in Open Cup play. They also really fielded a strong lineup, a lot of first choice players for Nico Estevez's team, and they were eliminated 2-1 by Louisville City of the USL Championship. So once again, it's really, really bad signs here. Austin has not progressed, in my opinion, as far as being a better attacking side than last season. Under Estevez, they lost to the Galaxy at home, a Galaxy team that was dealing with 2 legs on each side of that game against Austin in Champions Cup against Toluca, and had to rotate a little bit. And yeah, it's just really, really bad signs. I see this one being really, really grimy. Austin likes to make games that way, and Toronto hasn't fully had a convincing game yet, even amidst this now, 4-match unbeaten run, yes, at home, but a lot of dropped points in those situations. They were up 1-0 against Red Bulls, allowed a last gasp goal, like we said against Cincy, up against 10 men and don't get the 3 points. They needed a ton of red cards against the Rapids to come back from 2-0 down, and then against the Crew as well, another comeback. It obviously, points are points, and you take what you can get in any week, and especially early in the season, but it's not really been this full throttle type of team. And now with Mihailovic out, they're going to have to find other avenues to get results and goals and all of that. So this is a tough one to predict, but I'm going to stick with Toronto, the home team, to avoid losing here at a minimum. You also had Danny Pereira get re-injured after being out for about 4 or 5 games. In the Open Cup, he went off in about 10-15 minutes, so another really, really bad sign there. But once again, I think Toronto at least draws this and potentially gets the win in a lower scoring match. We've got an Eastern battle here with Montreal hosting the Red Bulls. Montreal not in the Open Cup. They had a full week of rest, but once again now a 4-match losing streak, and their first match at home against the Union after 6 weeks on the road to start the season didn't do them any better. They did go out to the lead but collapsed in the second half, and that just adds more fuel to the fire. That is the agenda to get the Saputos out, despite a pretty decent turnout from the home fans for an early afternoon match. And they host the Red Bulls. They beat Pittsburgh Riverhounds in the round of 32 of Open Cup at home 3-1. A pretty semi-strong lineup. You had Julian Hall, Forsberg, Mehmeti all starting. And they're, of course, also coming off that 2-2 draw against Miami on the road, preventing Miami from still getting a win in their new stadium. So, still, Michael Bradley's Red Bulls growing into this season, getting some solid results. And this is another instant kind of rematch from 3 or 4 weeks ago in MLS, where Montreal got its first win of the season against Red Bulls on the road in a really just surprising result considering the context of that match and going into it, and just completely dismantled the Red Bulls, who looked really second best and off the pace. So this is an instant chance for revenge, and I'm going to say that Red Bulls, despite having that extra game in the midweek and traveling here, will avoid defeat and are still strong enough, I think, to get the win. Next up, we've got a cross-conference battle, and it's one of those where Messi's coming to town, and so the local team, who doesn't really play Miami much especially, is moving to a much larger stadium than the one they play in to get that big game type of turnout. And here we got the Rapids playing at where the Broncos play in downtown Denver instead of where they play normally. And the Rapids actually, I think, this is actually a good scenario compared to when DC played Miami. The Rapids have been surprisingly fun. They've been dynamic, and they've just been entertaining to watch. They've been putting on a show, and that was seen last week against the Dynamo, where they won 6-2, flying out to an early lead and then just padding that late in the game. But Wells' side is just taking risks, and sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. But you can see by those score lines, they're just really unapologetic about, getting the ball forward, and just leads to a little bit of chaos. Now, Miami used to kind of be that. Now they've been a little bit more controlled. And the big news with Miami is that Mascherano was technically not fired officially, but he did leave due to personal reasons. But I think everyone can make that out as they will, as to what really happened there, because I don't think you just up and decide to leave, citing that you've kind of accomplished everything you wanted to in the middle of the following season. You would do that, after you won MLS Cup, and give the team time. So I think this was more of a actual firing than anything else. But now they will have the interim coach before searching for a new one, and we go into this carousel again with Messi and friends. Back-to-back draws now in their opening home matches at the new stadium, so that definitely played a role in Mascherano leaving, you have to feel like. But yeah, you would expect a strong response here. They're going to be motivated, of course, and I think this game should deliver as far as the goals. I think the Rapids have an actually serious chance of providing some type of competition for Miami for sure, because Miami hasn't been consistent whatsoever. They've really been shaky defensively, and finally it was Berterame getting his first goal in that game against the Red Bulls. But that's, we still need to see more consistency. They need to be better, and so I'm not really sure as far as the result goes here, but it's hard not to see goals in this one. I think the fans at Mile High who are coming to see Messi or their local team, whoever shows up, I think they're gonna get their money's worth. I think this one will be one of the matches of the week. In the East, we've got Atlanta against Nashville, one of those southeastern rivalries, and Atlanta moved on to the round of 16 in Open Cup. They beat Chattanooga. Meanwhile, Nashville, the big news out of Champions Cup, they beat Club America, being the first MLS team ever to win a game at the Estadio Azteca. I think it's called something different now technically, or part of its name, but regardless, in MLS history. And they did so going into that second leg on the road 0-0, and Hani Mukhtar getting the massive goal to put them through. Club America would have had to score 2 in response to advance due to that away goal rule, but they still held on with a double clean sheet in this tie against Club America. Just insanely impressive. They've also managed it in the midweek before by beating Charlotte with the rotated lineup. It's just incredible out of this club, especially also that Sam Surge wasn't playing in this second leg, so they did it without their number 9 and show that they're not fully reliant on this one player, who of course is a massive part of their goal production. And it's just incredible. But you have to expect some type of rotation from them going into this once again. But Atlanta just hasn't been convincing, right? And, Almiron, he actually got injured. It's a bit of a precautionary instance as far as why he got subbed off with the knee injury in Open Cup action. But still, I think they're going to be, of course, very cautious about, him playing right away after that on short rest. The good news, though, that Lobjanidze's x-rays were negative, which means there weren't any, negative is a good thing with what he's dealing with. But we'll see, what's going to happen with his timeline here with what he's dealing with. But, yeah, Atlanta, regardless, their last 2 home games, they haven't been able to find a win. Back-to-back losses after losing the Fire last week. And, they advanced in the Open Cup, but it's, kind of what they're supposed to be doing against these lower tier sides. And then Nashville, once again, they're going to rotate a little bit. Surge has been day to day with his hamstring issue, and that's going to be one to monitor. But I think even with a bit of rotation, you still have to like Nashville to avoid a loss, because Atlanta just really hasn't brung the energy, hasn't brung the pressure, and they just haven't shown that they are going to capitalize on a situation like this. Because I think if Charlotte couldn't, with all their know-how and how they make their home field a real dominant place for them, it's hard to expect Atlanta to outperform Charlotte in that type of context. But you never really know we'll have to wait for the lineups, of course. That's going to be a big thing this weekend, of course, with most MLS teams playing some sort of midweek action and actually going for it as far as the lineups in the Open Cup, and respecting the competition, which is a good sign. But yeah, I think Nashville, before we know lineups, I think Nashville, regardless, still avoids a loss, and they should still make it difficult for Atlanta, especially in the form they're in. Another Eastern battle here, as it's Cincy hosting Chicago, and Cincy has been absolutely dreadful as of late, but they did come back from a goal down with 10 men after Denke got a silly, I think it was a double yellow, if I'm not mistaken, but got the red card and was sent off, but they still found a way to get that point and come back and get something out of that. But regardless, the Cincy team has been really, really disappointing, a shell of itself from 2 or 3 years ago even, and now you're going to have Denke suspended for this one. Miazga has been questionable with a groin issue. Robinson, who didn't play last week, is in full training, so that's kind of the trade-off there. And on the other side for the Fire, they advanced in the Open Cup, beat Detroit City with a pretty rotated lineup, all things considered. Didn't have to, get too many guys too many minutes. Did it in 90 minutes as well. And they're riding a 3-match winning streak, especially 2 back-to-back shutout wins at home, which is a real important factor for them in this season if they want to really rise in the standings, because of course their home form was really dreadful, and their away form is what got them into the playoffs. So that's an important thing. They go back on the road here, and they have every chance to contend in this game, regardless of being playing in the midweek, while Cincy didn't. But the big players and statuses to monitor are Kuipers as the striker and Barroso the right back, and they have not been training with the team, at least in the build-up that was earlier this week. Maybe they get a session in on this final day on Thursday or something like that, but we'll have to see, and that's also another situation to monitor, of course. But based on the form, based on just the 2 play styles, I just don't think Cincy brings much that will threaten the Fire, even though the Fire play a style that leaves them vulnerable, yes, just as much as they like to create chances. I just don't think Cincy brings it. And with Denke out, it's just hard to see where the goal contribution comes from, unless, of course, Evander has another, just has one of those games where he pulls something out of the hat. But I favor the Fire to just edge this one out. And, if it's not a draw, which I think the Fire can stick to, I think they still have the better chance of getting with the 3 points. In this one, we've got New England hosting the Crew. Both of these teams played in Open Cup midweek, and they both advanced. New England beat Rhode Island on penalties, and the Crew beat Richmond Kickers 3-0, a far more convincing win on the road. And New England at home is on a 3-match win streak, technically 2 in all competitions. After losing to St. Louis, they beat Montreal and DC, back-to-back shutout wins, and that 6-1 Cincinnati win at home as well. So they've been on fire at home, and Langoni's been a key part of that once again. Meanwhile, the Crew, they have gotten a bit of better results. They finally got their first win a couple of weeks back against Atlanta, and then when they were kind of really favored against an Orlando side that had shipped 11 goals in the previous 2 matches before that matchup, they went down early, were able to salvage a draw, but still just a disappointing response after that first win. Now they travel back here on the road again, short rest. But the big news, of course, long term, is that Abu Ali, their star striker, who has been on fire, honestly, to start this season, is out for the year. He tore his ACL, and that's just a tragic, tragic injury for this team that, is really without too many top guys after, what's left of this squad from about 2 seasons ago when they were at their peak. It's really just Rossi, and Gazdag has, he started in Open Cup, I believe, but he's not been a regular starter by any means. He's very out of favor with the new manager after coming from the Union middle of last season. And yeah, it's going to be really difficult to find a true kind of center focal point for this Crew team. Obviously, they've been kind of scoring by committee. Their system kind of tends to play into that, but it's going to be really, really rough for the Crew to be as dominant with that injury in mind. Just across this entire season, it's going to be a real struggle to, you know, give themselves a shot at, you know, a middle of the pack playoff spot. They might have to just creep in at best, in my opinion. But, you know, I think with the Open Cup games in mind, with who both these teams put out there, I think this one's going to be a little bit more dull. The Crew are still kind of finding their footing offensively, and obviously with Abu Ali out, that takes a big hit. But I think this one ends in a draw. Here we've got New York City taking on Charlotte. Once again, both these teams played an Open Cup. Both advanced with very, very convincing wins, beating their lower tier opposition. So they'll both be in the round of 16 moving forward. But both are coming off losses in their last MLS matchup. And so they'll be looking to turn that form around. Charlotte have not been really good travelers, and they've been very, very comfortable playing at home their past 4, 5, or 6 matches, I believe. And so they'll have to turn things around playing at City Field now, where the Mets play, because NYC kind of alternates between those two, especially now that baseball season is going on. And yeah, NYC now 3 winless after starting the season unbeaten, and Thiago Martins is questionable with a leg injury on that back line, so that's going to be one to monitor for sure. They're looking for a reverse in form, and I think it's really anyone's game here, but I think NYC will just about get it done and return to winning ways, because I just still don't trust Charlotte on the road. Zaha, he has a hip issue that he was dealing with, and he was suspended last match anyways, so he's been dealing with that in the meantime. But all signs point to that he should be available for this matchup after getting that extra rest anyways from missing last week. But yeah, once again, I think it'll be a tight match, but I think Charlotte's going to be a little bit vulnerable in this one, and NYC will capitalize and use that home field advantage. Here we've got a cross-conference battle. It's Orlando against the Dynamo. Once again, both these teams advanced in Open Cup, beating their in-state kind of native teams from the lower leagues. And once again, both looking to rebound from MLS play, though. Orlando bouncing back from those 2 really embarrassing losses to draw at the Crew away on Sunday Night Soccer. Meanwhile, Dynamo taking a big hit of their own, shipping 6 to the Rapids, and they've been shipping a lot of goals lately, as you can see. 4 to Dallas, 2 to the Timbers. So they've kind of been a pretty back and forth team as well. And I think they're going to continue to be, with considering that front 3, the DP line. Guilherme has been absolutely on fire. I think he's leading the league in goals at the moment, or goal involvements. So he's been a top tier signing for them, but that doesn't fix one of probably the worst defenses in the league. So I think Orlando being back at home, and the Dynamo's nature here tends itself to a pretty high scoring matchup, in my opinion. But yeah, it's hard to call. These are 2 teams in really rough states, as far as I think both, obviously Orlando with the interim manager, they're not really finding a new identity yet, it seems. And then for the Dynamo, it's just really hard to back them to win any match when they're really just looking to outscore you. So considering that, I think it's, you know, probably good to expect a high scoring matchup in this one. And, you know, I just wouldn't trust either of these sides to come away with 3 points at the moment. They've been few and far between for both. Moving on, it's an Eastern battle here, and it's another one of those early rematches from the first couple of weeks of the season, and it's the Union hosting DC United. DC got the better of the Union 1-0 in the season opener, where Ty Baribo, the former Union player, scored against his old team, and that looked like the start of maybe something special for DC United this season, at least, you know, considering battling for a playoff spot. But it's been very, very bleak since then. It's now 3 winless in MLS play, and they were one of the 3 teams eliminated in the Open Cup, and probably the most embarrassing of the 3, considering that they lost to 1 Knoxville of the USL League One. So out of the 3 that lost, this was the lowest of the 3 tier opposition faced. And they lost after having multiple leads, actually, including a lead in extra time, and choked that, and then lost on penalties at home, mind you. Meanwhile, the Union, they finally got their first win in MLS play, so it seems like, you know, not to bank all on one result here or there, But in that Montreal match, yes, it was against Montreal, who is also a terrible team, but you could tell by the reactions that they were really hungry for that result. They needed a comeback to do it, and who knows, whether Bradley Carnell has the dressing room, doesn't have it, what have you. He's not been performing well in his second season, which is becoming a trend. But I think that win was a big one for the Union. They really needed that just to get that out of their way, out of their mindset. And I think they'll get the revenge here. I think DC United is far more in a free fall at the moment. Baribo is still questionable with his thigh issue. And they just literally cannot score goals. I mean, take away the Open Cup game, because if you're not scoring multiple goals on a team technically 2 tiers below you, then that's an entirely other issue. But in MLS play, they're now 3 straight scoreless. And it's just a really big issue. Can't trust the team to win if they don't have reliable scoring options. Pirani hasn't even been starting really or performing. His production's dried up. Once again, Baribo, their main threat, is not available, most likely, but we'll have to see. And as for the Union, it's Danley, Jean-Jacques, questionable with the knee issue, but regardless, Union have their own defensive problems, obviously, but I just think with the momentum swinging their way back at home here, they're going to follow that up. I think they get back-to-back wins and get the revenge on DC. Next up, we've got Dallas hosting the Galaxy. Dallas, after a couple of home wins, or back-to-back wins, drew at home to St. Louis, so a bit of a disappointment there considering their form and their just ability to just score teams out of the park. Meanwhile, the Galaxy, they were continued their real embarrassing tie against Toluca, losing 3-0 in the second leg to make it 7-2 loss on aggregate in the Champions Cup quarterfinals, so they're out of that. And Dallas didn't play midweek. They are not in the Open Cup, so they're going to have this full week of rest. But they are dealing with Ramiro, one of their key midfielders, who's looking to be out long-term now with a knee issue that he picked up in that St. Louis match. So that's another midfielder for them that is now out of the question or dealing with something in general. And so that changes the complexion of, how they set up these strikers, how Farrington and Musa have been able to be so, productive, in a sense. But still, you have those 2 guys up top. They have 2 very good threats, and I think they'll still find a way to work around it, especially in this match. Most importantly, against the Galaxy, who, yes, they beat Austin in the midst of those 2 ties, but still, you still have Glesnes dealing with an issue. Painsil did return in Champions Cup off the bench, but Tommy got injured, and I think that's another key loss. I don't think he recovers in time for this one on that short rest. So he's going to be questionable, probably doubtful for this one. But yeah, the Galaxy just haven't been convincing. They've been shipping goals and not getting the results when all their offseason signings were built to prevent these type of score lines, these type of performances. And going on the road here at Dallas on short rest, I just don't see this working out for them. I don't think they get back-to-back road wins in Texas after beating Austin last week. I just think it's too much of an ask, and I think Dallas will handle the Galaxy, bounce back from that draw against St. Louis. Move over to the West, where I think we have one of the more unpredictable matchups of the entire weekend. It's Minnesota hosting the Timbers, and Timbers didn't play in midweek. Minnesota did. They had to go 120 minutes and PKs without a single goal to win against Sacramento Republic. So they're into the round of 16 of Open Cup. But yet again, it's just not really convincing. Even their wins recently have come off some really ugly goals against San Diego and Galaxy. Yeboah has gotten on the end of some random cross deflected into his path where he's basically in the 6-yard box. And, they're getting the results, yeah, but it's just like more so the teams are in turmoil that they're playing than anything else. San Diego also got a red in that matchup, so that's been a concerning thing with them, which we'll get to. But yeah, the big thing for them with the Loons is James finally got his first start after making a couple of bench appearances for a little bit, and he only played 65 minutes, so that really tells you where his fitness is at, what his real contribution will be to this team week in, week out. And it's going to be a real grind for him and miraculous type of effort in the coming month or two for him to get really back towards being an actual option for the World Cup for Colombia. So he's going to need to really pick it up, and we'll see if he gets another start here back-to-back or not, how they decide to manage his minutes. But that's one important note to watch. Yobo, of course, has been the goal scorer. Meanwhile, for the Timbers, they gave LAFC not just their first goal conceded in MLS play last weekend, but their first loss as well, dropped points. And it came off the end of a very, very late winner by Kelsey. And so they're looking to follow that up. But once again, they're just so defensively disorganized. Yes, obviously the goal they conceded by the teenager Terry was, all credit to him, not really their fault, but still, it's just, they just don't seem to hold clean sheets. So that makes for a very interesting game, considering Minnesota is going to have tired legs, and who knows what their approach will be. But I think they'll make it very difficult for Timbers, being that they're at home and the just general setup of their structure. So I think that's why it's very hard to call. I think they can probably exploit the Timbers in that sense, but they're also going to be everyone got a lot of minutes in the midweek, so it could just make for a moment or two that is the difference, and it's really hard to tell who takes advantage of that. So I'm going to predict a 1-1 draw. We have another instant rematch from several weeks back in the West here. Neither had midweek action and featured in the Open Cup and are not in the competition. It's RSL versus San Diego. RSL got a comeback draw on the road at San Diego to really kind of kickstart, in a sense, this real rut that San Diego is in. And now they've gotten back-to-back games with red cards. It's going to be McVay suspended for this one after Dua got one against San Jose that suspended him for the match against Minnesota. And Pellegrino is still doubtful with the lower body issue. So we'll see. Of course, Mikey Barnes is putting the trust in the young kids, but it's kind of misfiring back on them in a sense. Meanwhile, RSL continuing this unbeaten run. They also had an extra week off because they didn't play in the previous week, so they've had a lot of time to assess. They don't really have any injuries of note. The only real situation to monitor is Anelli, because he was only supposed to be out a couple of weeks to start the season, but he has yet to even feature, make the bench, or anything. And so we'll see when he finally gets back into the fold. But it's been kind of quiet on that end as far as when the return is actually expected. And Luna, of course, since coming back, has already provided his, weight and gold so far for this team. But everyone's contributing. The signings have all gotten off to they've just been really complimentary for each other. And so that makes for, I think, a really interesting rematch that it's hard to not expect goals in again, because RSL has really been clicking in attack, but San Diego gives up those chances. But they're also going to be hungry after being really stale and not really looking like themselves as far as the creativity, that connectiveness. But that's also been down to back-to-back games with red cards that, of course, affect the entire game. They're probably one of the only teams that can still look competent, as we saw against Toluca in the first leg, with the man down. But still, that's a difficult ask to keep that energy up game after game if it keeps happening. So I'm assuming they don't get another red in this one, and it's a little bit more of a balanced game. But yeah, I think this one has another feel to it of a high-scoring draw where maybe one team gets that one extra moment and takes it, but it's hard to predict. So I'm going to go with a similar scoreline, something along the lines of 2-2 or 3-2 either side. To wrap up Saturday night's action, it's the Sounders hosting St. Louis, and the Sounders will go into this one with a bit of a sour taste in their mouths because they were eliminated in the Champions Cup quarterfinals despite a very positive second leg in which they won the leg 3-1 against Tigres, but they went into it down 2-0, and that one away goal from Tigres was the difference despite the tied aggregate, since the Sounders couldn't score away in the first leg. So almost got it through, but it just wasn't enough despite a very veteran-like performance from a Brian Schmetzer team in international, or not international, but a competition outside of MLS. And yeah, it's they've been eliminated, but they've still been playing well in the meantime amidst their legs, um, just getting business done and keeping clean sheets. Especially, they also had the previous weekend of MLS action off, so despite coming into this match on short rest, they didn't really have that extra load management situation from last weekend. So I think you can expect still a pretty strong lineup in this one, considering they don't have anything else to look forward to since they got eliminated. And meanwhile, St. Louis, they got a much needed kind of morale boost in a sense just to get a win, and a convincing one at that, against Tulsa in the Open Cup 4-0, with a couple of guys scoring. And they've, turned things around form-wise in the past couple of weeks because they've gotten a couple of road draws, and they're just looking a little bit better. But they're still rounding into form. Cordova's still looking for that first MLS goal. And regardless, I think going into Seattle, especially off the back of a long kind of road stretch here that they've been in, 3 out of the last 4 in MLS play, I just don't think it bodes well. And I think Seattle will look to kind of, I don't think they batter them, but in that sense, I think they'll look to kind of let out that frustration and put up another solid performance to finally focus on MLS play. It's Sunday Night Soccer on this one, and we've got LAFC hosting San Jose, so that one of those California derbies here. And LAFC in midweek, one of those 2 MLS clubs alongside Nashville to advance into the Champions Cup semifinal. They really did not make it all too sweaty for themselves at all, right? After that 3-0 first leg. Yes, they gave up an early goal in the second leg of the Cruz Azul, but largely just stuck through it and put up a professional performance to get through and move on to face Toluca in that second other semifinal. Meanwhile, the Earthquakes, they advance, continuing their very, very hot form. 3 wins on the bounce in MLS, but also into the round of 16 in Open Cup, beating Phoenix. And Bruce Arena is just making the most out of the little that he has, getting the best out of a lot of players, all without kind of Werner as well being featuring, starting, being an impactful player. So that's very, very impressive, of course. And yeah, I think this is going to be a good marquee matchup. It's going to be a big test for the Earthquakes as well, because LAFC, I'm not going to put losing the Timbers, like I said, ahead of that match against them. If they did, and they did, I'm not going to put it against them because, they were dealing with this. They are clearly, one game means nothing in the context of an entire season and the context of what else they were prioritizing. And so they still put up a solid performance, probably hard done to not get the draw in that Timbers game. So they're back to this real MLS action after advancing a little bit of time before the semis. And it's going to be difficult for San Jose to bring that same attacking finishing against a defensively solid team like LAFC, but we'll see how much they rotate or not. But I think we'll see a decently strong lineup, especially considering they'll have that extra day going into Sunday to rest. So this is going to be a real treat to watch, to see how these 2 tactics and coaches collide. And we'll still be monitoring Eustachio's situation with the blood clot, because he is expected to return by the end of April. Dealing with that, but you just never know, because that's a rare kind of scary situation to be dealing with. So there's not really a clear timeline. So my prediction, I think LAFC continues this. I don't think San Jose has enough to go on the road and beat LAFC outright, but I can see a tight 1-1 match with potentially LAFC just using their star power to power pass them 2-1.